Ms. Kasbekar. Kindly deliver your talk. Thank you, ma'am. Sure.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Wonderful to be here, truly an honor and a privilege. My heartfelt thanks to Monica Reddy ji for inviting me and inviting Deloitte to share some of my personal views on gender parity and gender inclusion, and also to share with you what we've done at Deloitte in the space of gender inclusion. I hope talking a little bit about our journey at Deloitte will communicate to you how we approach it, what is our mindset when we think of gender inclusion, what are we trying to achieve in a corporate setting, and also some of our challenges. A little bit about my background. I have in my childhood years experienced gender discrimination as a child in a rather stark way, and of course I'm not going to get into any details there, but the reason I mention it is to let you know that I guess that it has been a driver to make me feel very passionately about the subject, about the cause, and I have worked over 25 years in the space of inclusion, predominantly gender inclusion, but also in my earlier organizations, I have worked around socio-economic inclusivity and trying to get people more mainstreamed through the work we did. In all the years that I have worked around gender inclusion, there are 3 key top inclusion lessons that I have learned, and I want to share that with you today. And I'm going to keep it very brief, I promise you. The first, include men. And that's why what Swati Singh ji said really resonated with me. I truly believe that unless we draw men into the conversation, we're not going to make much headway around gender equality, gender parity, gender inclusion, call it what you will. We've got to include men. And we've got to be very relentless and persistent about it. I get it that many a times we find that not just men, not just some men, but even some women wonder where can we start this, bringing about a change? How to approach it? How to get everyone to understand what role they can play to contribute towards creating an environment that is more inclusive. I get that. But whatever it may be, lesson 1, as far as possible, please include both genders into the conversation to make it meaningful and to make it impactful. And that is the one thing that I will say we have over the years done rather successfully at Deloitte. When we started several years ago, we actually, even within our organization, used to refer to it as the Women's Initiative. And of course, at that time, it was very relevant to call it Women's Initiative. But we very soon found that the male colleagues, even though they wanted to be supportive, they weren't quite sure how. And they weren't quite sure that this was about them or was it just about women. So that is point 1. Point 2, second lesson. Think of this as a journey and think of yourself as a pioneer. You know, although I will acknowledge that from an Indian society or even globally, the conversations around gender inclusion date back several decades, no doubt, but it's picked up momentum only in the last 10, 15 years, at least as far as I can tell, at the scale at which we see it all around us today. So instead of feeling dejected instead of feeling demoralized that, we're not seeing the change that we are, that we want to, think of yourself as someone who is a trailblazer, who is going to, in whatever small way, make an impact and bring about that difference, no matter how small. And again, let me connect this point with what we do at Deloitte. We, several years ago, created a gender sensitization program that we made at least all our senior leaders go through, and it was a big aha moment for many people, both men and women. And more recently, that gender sensitization program we have replaced with an overall inclusion sensitization program where we made it mandatory for every professional in our organization to go through, and we've done that very successfully now. Not saying that one sensitization program is necessarily going to bring about a change overnight, of course not, but it's a step in the right direction. And it's generated the conversation that we wanted to generate. Point 3, be bold and be courageous. And by that I mean, I want to demonstrate what I mean by that by narrating an anecdote that I experienced very early on at Deloitte when I joined. Soon after I joined, I was privileged enough to be part of a boardroom conversation where we were talking about how we can have more balanced leadership at the top, at the partner director level and at senior manager level. And I suddenly heard one of our senior most partners, male partners, make the following point. He said to the room full of leaders, top leadership of Deloitte sitting in that boardroom, that he wants, I'm going to try and paraphrase him. He said, let's get our recruiters to hire women managing directors, women at managing director level from outside and bring them in. Let's hire women at senior manager level and bring them in. And in order to do that, if I have to pay them compensation that is way more than what we are paying our partner, managing directors in the system or our senior managers in the system, then I'm willing to do it, and so be it. But in order to attract women, let's bring them in. While my jaw dropped and I was so impressed and delighted to hear this, the general reaction in the boardroom was, like, what does that mean? It's not going to send the right message to our people currently with us in the system. We'll have some guys resigning. And his reaction to that was, if they're resigning, let them resign. They've got to understand it, they've got to get it. They've got to understand that unless we have a more balanced, gender-balanced leadership at the top, we're not going to make the headway that we want to make. We're not going to be appealing enough to our clients. We're not going to send the right message outside, externally or internally, and it's very critical. And what struck me the most was that by saying that with so much conviction, this particular partner essentially sent the message to everyone in the room as well, that if you don't get it, then think about it, take a step back, and let's just make it happen. So these are my top 3, and by the way, just to add and to link again, talking about bold leadership, talking about courageous leadership, this very senior partner in the firm was instrumental in initiating what we call the sponsorship program at Deloitte. What is the sponsorship program? We assign experienced women, senior managers at manager level, to one partner and managing director who will be invested in that woman professional's growth and success, not just by mentoring her, but literally by making it his goal to make sure that she advances in her career and makes it to top leadership positions. So this sponsorship program has truly paid dividends for us. And this wasn't many, many years ago. This was just as recent as 5, 6 years ago, I think we initiated it. Today, we've seen a fabulous jump in the numbers. And again, this is not artificially done. This is, what has this done? This has provided women with the confidence that we need, with the exposure that we need, with the ability to build our networks. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, growth in an organization has a lot to do with network, with your network you build. And with visibility and with exposure, that's what it's done. So these are the few things that I wanted to share with you. I also will just take a couple of more minutes to just say that my entire team that helps drive all of this at Deloitte is sitting right here. And many, many thanks to Simi, Priscilla, and Raghav for doing such an amazing job of what we accomplish at Deloitte. And one last thing. What is the mindset or what is our philosophy when we wake up every morning and come to Deloitte to do this? It is merely this. Even if we can impact 1 or 2 lives, we will feel good about it and we will get a good night's sleep. We're not necessarily going to be able to change the world, to boil the ocean, as they say, overnight. But every single day in your respective environment, in your respective organizations, if you can do something little, even a conversation, like I said, that will have a ripple effect, it is well worth it. With those words, I once again thank the organizers for inviting me, and it's been an honor and a pleasure. And may I quickly just take a minute to find out if anyone has a question, and I'll keep it very brief. Anyone would like to ask or make a comment? Okay, if not, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And I would request Mrs. Monica Reddy and Mrs. G. Indira. She is the Honorable Member of Pragna Bharati, to felicitate Mrs. Amita Kasbekarji. Mrs. Kiranmai Pandyala. She is the COO, CHRO, and AMD. Skills and technology is her topic of discussion. She'll be speaking on making Indian women ready for the digital transformation. Mrs. Kiranmai Pandyala, kindly come on to the dais and deliver your speech.
Yeah, that's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Hyderabad. Now I hear the voices. Yeah, as Amita has spoken, who is truly passionate about D&I think most of us, from a women leader's perspective, Karuna is going to speak next. It's just been a huge value for several of us who are passionate and embraced with the thought process of women empowerment and development. And so I congratulate the National Women's Summit, Pragna Bharati and others, to have put this together. I'm sure there will be lessons to be learned in terms of, what else could we do. But without much ado, she's given us 3 nuggets, Amita. What I'm focusing on now is, again, what we have done at AMD, which is Advanced Micro Devices. It's a chip maker, the computer chip maker. And what are those initiatives which will help us shape the communities we live in? How do we contribute to digital transformation. I have some slides, if you can bring up the slides, please. So it's just the few things which we are contributing, because when we talk about a few things, all of us, if we can really look at various initiatives, various activities, every single one of you sitting out there can contribute. And I'm sure some of you are actively associated and contributing, because unless every single one of us, men and women, move ahead, we will not be able to bring in something called transformation. So when we're talking about digital transformation, how do we make women ready? So before we really talk about women, I think the journey begins with the girl child. So what is our focus on girl child? How do we really initiate or plant the right seeds to help the girl children in the society to start really becoming digitally literate? So these are the thoughts I have put together. Okay, so I'm just looking at where to I point, so I got it. There has been a study, and I thought I'll bring in to you some of the data in terms of what Microsoft Asia has done to really look at the digital transformation. What does that imply? So this is what some of the highlights of the study are. So we're talking about how from a business point of view. And the reason I'm bringing in that is we're talking about empowerment, we're talking about digital literacy, we're talking about investing in women, we're talking about really transforming a nation. Now, in order to go, it's like we need to learn to walk before, we need to crawl before we walk, and we need to, walk before we run, and so on. All of us are aware of that. So in order to accomplish that, let's understand what's a business imperative. And this particular study, especially on digital transformation, is specific to Asia, and there are pointers for India as well. So we're talking about business leaders in India specifically. Look at the high percentage, 92%. That's a huge percentage of business leaders who believe that every organization will become digital or needs to be digital in the coming years, because that's the only imperative. And why are we even talking about it? Because if we are talking about the digital transformation, we need to see whether there is a need, whether there is a felt need, and if there is, how are we going to contribute in that particular transformation wave? And we're talking about 2 or 3 major things. These are the buzzwords today. If you listen to anything, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, these are the ones when you're talking about technology disruptions today in whatever space. So blockchain technologies. If these are the buzzwords today in terms of technology disruptors of tomorrow, what does that mean? How are we getting the women and the girl child, again, ready to get into this space? 88% of Indian respondents believed cloud computing and decreasing cost of devices and so on. It's the affordability piece we're referring to, and that's where, again, there is so much India can offer as a nation, and we all have heard, be it from the Prime Minister, be it from various ministries, and so on. We're all now, given our demographic dividend, extremely well positioned across the globe in terms of the talent, the young millennials who are entering the workforce, and how do we really take them forward in the digital transformation wave. And then we are looking at other 2 words which you hear, virtual reality and augmented reality. How many of you have seen a movie called Bahubali? Almost everyone. Okay. The reason I'm saying, you must be wondering, there are lots of nuances in that movie which uses some of these graphics technologies. And I'm very proud to say we are the company which made it possible. AMD is the company which brought in the graphics technology partnership for this movie. So when we talk, it's literally our teams have lived along with Rajamouli and team in the film city to make this dream come true. Right? We're talking about a magnum opus, a media and entertainment space. But I also look at the characterization in that movie, and I feel it's extremely relevant for what we're talking today. How many of you are impressed with characterization of Devasena and Shivagami? I'm sure almost every one of you are saying, oh yeah, that's how. So the kind of boldness, the kind of courage, the kind of focus, the kind of grit and determination which are demonstrated by the women characters in that particular movie is what I think we are aiming for, right? We also have our epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, where we talk about glorified women characterized, or we talk about goddesses. That's what formerly the minister was referring to. But more importantly, I think it's that women, that identity in each one of us. How do we awaken that and help build that confidence in every woman across the layers of the society? Some of us are more fortunate or privileged, and we have been able to move across seamlessly. There's so many who are less fortunate. And I think when we are all meeting and talking about things and deliberating, majority of us would like to give it back to the community to help those women, those girl children, to really cross those roadblocks or barriers and really be ready. So since we're talking about skills and technology, how do they get into that mainstream? How do they really become, empowered and enabled so that they earn not just a livelihood, but live with dignity? I think that's what is the focus. And this is just to tell us there is a huge need in the society today. And from a business perspective, digital transformation is in the making. Now, having said that, this is just to give you, again, a snapshot of what is the mission when we're talking about Digital India. Yesterday, the budget has come in. I'm sure several of you have looked at the highlights, if not the entire thing. For Digital India mission, Prime Minister has allocated 373 crores. It's a huge investment. So just for that mission alone, we're talking about a huge investment coming in, along with the infrastructural and various other agricultural food. I'm not getting into that. But this is of importance to us since this is the topic I'm really deliberating on. National Skills Mission, as well as Corporate India partnerships. It's happening all over. Amita was talking about Deloitte. I can talk about AMD and several other corporates where we are completely embraced with this mission. So we are not just working on what is our current business imperative or roadmap or strategy. We all invest, whether you name it under the CSR initiative, which is corporate social responsibility, or several other initiatives which we embrace. We're looking at how do we connect with the communities we live in or part of. How do we make it a better community than it is today? So for all that, our connection and partnership and collaboration is bringing in additional funds, not just what the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister has tabled. Now, what are the two things which some of us as corporates are wedded to and really spearheading? Computer literacy among girl children. Among all children, but among girl children in specific is our focus. The other is, how do we empower women through digital skills? So if you look at this snapshot, these are considered today to be barriers of digital transformation in India. What are those? Cyber threats and security concerns. That means we need ethical hacking. We need people to be well-versed in coding, but at the same time, they should be able to understand if somebody is going to hack into a system, how do they ward that off? So we're talking about physical security, now we're talking about cyber security, and how do we, and that's part of the digital skills we're looking at. We're talking about the uncertain economic environment, which all of you know, Amita just touched upon it. The socio-economic environment, again, has threats in terms of whether it's business imperatives you're referring or the cloud technologies we're referring to and so on. And the most important piece, while all of us are rejoicing, and I said, wow, India is one country among the world today, which has this beautiful, what we refer to as demographic dividend. We have so many more in terms of the millennial workforce, but sadly, are they ready to enter this and grab these opportunities? Majority of them perhaps are not skilled relevantly to enter into the work phase or, as we say, the jobs or employment sector. So that is our focus as corporates. What can we contribute to enable this? Lack of supporting government policies and ICT infrastructure. And that's where the governance, and I'm glad on this platform, we're talking to, the ministry or others, their viewpoints, their perspectives, or the bureaucrats and others. And finally, of course, the rising costs. And why is India really important out there? India is known for what we refer to as jugaad innovation. This is the land. There is a state. I mean, today we all talk about papads, right? We enjoy it, the fry ones. Papad, you all know, right? So it's a fryums, whatever variety. We all know the beautiful story of how lizard papad came into being, and it's all because of one empowered woman and her team. Can we put our hands together for how someone who is merely, it's not about someone who's educated and who's got all this digital savvy, but she found a way to really create something as a self-help group they've started, and today it's become a virtual industry, right? Huge one, and everybody remembers that brand and recollects. So same thing, and we have several other stories, I'm sure. Now, having said that, affordability, be it in healthcare, how do we really bring it to the communities, the layered socio-economic threats we have? That is important. So when we talk about digital, again, everything is how do we bring the cost down in terms of the innovations we create and what do we do? So there is space for entrepreneurial skills. There is space for women who can bring in their creativity and innovation. And sometimes maybe they can work from home. Because a computer in hand or a smartphone in hand today gives that kind of a power and ability where some of your constraints in terms of safety or travel or moving, all those constraints perhaps can be minimized. So that's where we're talking about women in particular who may not have the same advantages as other counterparts in the society to move around, or because they're also the primary caregivers in the family situation. So given all this is why we are focusing on what we refer to as what are the barriers and how do we really contribute to women readiness to enter this digital transformation. Okay, one more time. No? Maybe you should run the slides, I can tell you. Did you get it? No. Can you move to the next slide, please, on the system? Okay, looks like it's frozen while they're bringing it up. So I think the message I wanted to communicate is where are we today and where do we need to go in terms of digital transformation? So can you just flip back one slide? Yeah. This is just to give you in terms of the supporting data which is available, and this is all based on research study. Where are we? What are the business options? And how do we really? So you don't have to look at it's like an eye chart, but a lot of research has been done. There is data which is clearly suggesting some of the skills or competencies and where they are and where do we need to go. So moving forward, I wanted to share a few initiatives we as corporate really indulge in. So we're not just speaking, but we walk the talk. So what do we do by walking the talk? These are the investments we've already made and we will continue to make. So the first one is we have some NGO partners we work with as a company. So Quest Alliance is a NGO partner based out of Bangalore. What do? They've created what we refer to through gaming, how do you learn digital skills, computer literacy and so on. So they've created a program and they use the software called Scratch, those of you who are interested. So it's an entire program of helping. It's along with the regular curriculum in the government schools. So we've chosen or adopted certain government schools, both in Bangalore and Hyderabad, where we have our company footprint in terms of the employees, because we wanted our employees also to share their time, go teach them during weekends and whenever they can. So we have this program and you can see it's happening. We have a tutor and we've talked to these schools. So it's adopted. We donated the labs and they have the systems. They have the software already built in. So along with their regular whatever studies they have in the 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th, they also come in for these coaching classes. It's throughout the year, throughout the academic year. And they invest their additional hour. And we had some sessions with them. It was so touching for us because they really, and we found, interestingly, it's a diverse and inclusive in the sense it's for all. We didn't say it's only for girl students, but you won't believe it. What touched me especially when we went in after 6 months of investing in this was very clearly many of the girls seem to have taken to it much more than the boys. We said, how did that happen? We didn't do anything special, anything different. but looks like they're soaking it like a sponge, and they find it as truly empowering and enabling because they're building in their creativity, and they've never even touched a machine before, coming from the socioeconomic background they come from. So it's all absolutely, empowering. You can see how many girls are out there, and the way they started building confidence, because we asked them to make presentations, we asked them to create certain things, and we could see how they can. And we bring them to the company, show them when they grow, because we want to invest in their education as they move into the workforce. So it's not just in the school level, +2, and then, their collegiate education as well will be sponsored by the company, so that they can enter the workforce with dignity and confidence. And that's how you start the divide you have, the bridge is what we are creating, some of us as corporates. If I move into another one, this is another NGO partner we work with, where we're talking about slum children. So these are the ones, they go scout, and these are the urban child labor, in other words, when you talk about slum children. So their lives are there is a difference we are trying to make. Again, even if the coverage is small, it's again, as I said, a drop in the ocean, but it's an important drop in the ocean, because every single one of us can contribute. So we bring in the slum children into the education, mainstream education, and entire thing is funded by the organization or the corporate. Another one where again the schools are adopted, other schools. So here we are doing science labs. So everywhere in different ways. What does it mean? They don't have access to models. They don't understand a concept. So we bring in an NGO partner who is able to showcase to them what does it mean. Just the other day, I think this city and everyone across the globe was talking about the Chandragrahan, right? The blue moon and a rare phenomenon and so on. But a child from an underprivileged section, how do they even understand the concept of an eclipse? What does it mean? So we enable them to create those models and learn, because as you all know, STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and math are the skills where we find a digital transformation can occur, or when someone is attuned in these skills, they can be part of the digital transformation. So that's the dream we all have to enable, and hence we have facilitated these science labs, and it's a mobile lab, and it can tour from one school to another and enable a larger coverage of students who can participate and learn. And this is again a program where we're looking at youth. So it's not just confined to primary and secondary school level. We're also looking at youth who are straying or they don't know how to find. So what are the value-added programs we can give in the digital literacy to enable them to move into the mainstream workforce? So women as well, and you can see these are all graduated from that youth and women, as we said, the support program, which bridges their gap in education and enables them to start moving into the mainstream corporate or other jobs. So these are the various initiatives. So that's all I have. Just to tell you, once again I repeat, what we're doing is just a small step, but in the right direction. And there's several corporates like us who follow suit or who are working in, because it's not one who can make the difference, but even one can change the world if we have the right intent. And that's how we contribute to the skills and technology which is relevant for women and men to be ready for the digital transformation. Thank you all, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take those. Looks like you're all hungry, and then anyway, you have Karuna coming in, I guess, next. So over to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiranmai Pendiala ji, for that enlightening presentation on digital health, digital India, your project on digital. Now, I would request Shalini Vamsi Krishna, she is a member of Pragna Bharati, to felicitate Kiranmai ji on behalf of whole Pragna Bharati team. Now, I would like to invite Mrs. Karuna Gopal. She is the President, Foundation for Futuristic Cities. She is going to speak on women leaders from farm to factory, which is a road less traveled. Welcome, Karuna ji. आप में से जो मैडम आप स्वाति जी से कुछ पूछना चाह रही थी, मंत्री स्वाति जी से, आप में से कोई महिला उनसे बात करना चाह रही थी उनके अपने केस के संदर्भ में? आप प्लीज एक बार बैक स्टेज आ जाइए, इस पीछे आ जाइए, थोड़ा आप डिटेल्स दे दीजिए उनसे कनेक्ट करने के लिए। आ जाइए
I don't need a pointer. Oh. Good morning to all of you. Thankfully, this is not yet afternoon. Unlike the other speakers, I don't have a presentation. I scribbled some notes. Let me just try and look at my notes and talk to you. I'm afraid the topic is also not what has been announced. I'm going to speak on women leadership and pushing women into working, and from a government perspective. So for many of you, it may really look like some macro stuff, but it's really important to know because we really don't know. Some of you can actually get into policy making. Some of you can occupy leadership positions. So the entire perspective that I'm going to give on women, pushing women into working at a national level, what have governments done and where have they made the mistakes? So I'll make some dramatic statements and then they are not off the record. So let me start with the most popular and the interesting program that the world does, the World Economic Forum. I'm sure all of you are familiar with that. So the World Economic Forum, typically a lot of things happen there. A lot of discussions happen on how to push economies forward, what is taking people forward, what is industrialization doing, what is technology doing, etc. But the most important thing that gets talked there is about the gender gap report. The gender gap report. It's nothing but they try to take women and men and compare them against 4 parameters: education, health, economic participation, political empowerment. These are the 4 parameters, and they compare women and men from across different nations. And wherever there is less gap in all these parameters, they say that economy is moving forward and women are really doing very well in that economy. So year after year, you will find that Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and now Iceland, keep taking away the award year after year. Now, why is that? Typically, some of you would also know, if you look at Finland, most of these Nordic countries have introduced voting way back. Like, for instance, in Finland, 1906, women were allowed to vote. And if you look at women in any of these Nordic nations, almost 45% of them occupy the leadership positions. Like 46% are in the parliament, around 48% are CEOs of companies. I was told that some 47% are diplomats. Just imagine. I myself have a lot of friends from the Finnish parliament, and all of them are women. So it's exciting to see that these countries are really surging ahead. Another country that's really strangely moving forward and giving a run for money for any of these is Rwanda. Rwanda in Africa. A few decades ago, Rwanda was devastated with genocide, total devastation. But today you find in Rwanda, more than 50% of women occupy the parliament seats. So it has broken the ceiling, whatever it is, it's surging ahead. Now, the reason, just pay attention to whatever I'm saying. It's interesting because when you compare these nations, India and United States are far, far, far behind. United States, if you see typically, 60% of women are highly qualified. If you see the statistics, they say engineers, doctors, they're all surging ahead as far as education is concerned. But when it comes to occupying board positions, they're barely 2 to 3%. The same thing's happening in India. So both the nations know that they have to really push women into working, really push women into leadership positions. But, but the most important thing to know is it the right thing to do? Is it really right to push women into conventional jobs? Is the question that the world is asking now. Some of the senior policymakers, thinkers, thought leaders are sitting and debating about it. Now let me explain why. A few years ago, I was giving a keynote address in Singapore. Singapore, one of the top conventions in Marina Bay Sands, the biggest hotel. It's thousands of people sitting. And I went in a sari like this, and I gave a keynote. And at the end of it, I said, thank you very much. It was a ministry, BCA, that has invited me. And then thank you very much. And I said, I seem to be the only woman in the auditorium. I made a controversial statement like that, little knowing that there were women sitting in the audience. Now tell me, why did I miss the point? I missed the point because in the 1,000 people seated there were women wearing black suits. And most of them were just, sitting, and there's no way I could make out. Then later, when I saw them up close, I realized that they were all wearing black suits. They had short hair. They had no makeup on. Well, that's fine. That's the way work is making people look and behave these days. So I understood that, but in a while, in most conferences today, the discussions are hovering on the topic of health. I represented India at UNFCCC, as it's called, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. And on the sidelines, there was a discussion on women and health, and doctors congregated there. And most of them gave shocking observations. They say that women are increasingly becoming infertile. If you see the fertility map of the world fertility map of women, increasingly you find dots of red. Most women are becoming infertile. Thanks to the kind of life they're leading, thanks to the kind of stress they're taking, thanks to the kind of competition they're giving to men, behaving exactly in the same way as men. So these discussions today point out very clearly that perhaps the frenzy with which we are pushing women to look at work has to be understood differently. Now let me put forth a few more other things to you. Perhaps the way we look at things, perhaps the way the governments interpreted things, the way they looked at statistics, I think there's a whole bunch that has to be revisited. For instance, recently there was a UN meeting in China, and Beijing came out with a declaration about women, and again pushing them into working and putting them in very stressful jobs. One of the important statistics that came out was they were discussing about the health status of women and men. And they compared men and women against few parameters. How many of men and women have cardiovascular disease, cancer, and accident and injuries? Now pay attention to this. When they came to accident and injuries, they found 30% of men and 30% of women actually have injuries, and they are disabled, or they have problems. So they thought, since men and women have the same problem, let's not look at it. So women don't need any help because it's the same incidence. But when they started digging deeper, they realized, very, very important, friends, these are things that are always pushed under the carpet. Not many really know what's happening and how policies are framed and why women end up being losers. When they dug deeper, they discovered that when men had those injuries, most of the injuries were attributable to the risk behavior of men. You know, they were either rash driving or there was a road rage, or they took risks like, you know, bungee jumping. They had injuries. But when they actually analyzed the cause for injuries in women, they discovered the injuries were because of domestic violence. The injuries were because they were walking on the streets and, you know, men came and maybe hit them and went away. So it presented a completely different picture. So statistics is a very complicated and a dangerous game that the world is looking at. So obviously when the United States says, okay, let's push women into working and let's change our labor laws, I think India is trying to do the same without actually digging deep into what works for the country. Everything has to be country-centric. Now I'll give you an example. Now take a look at Japan. You know what is the most highly sold commodity in Japan today? Anyone? Can you name one item that is sold like hotcakes in Japan? No? In Japan, the highest selling commodity is an adult diaper, because Japan is an aging economy. And the Japanese premier thought that the easiest way to have women deliver children is to make women stay at home. So he looked at all the economies around the world and said that if women stayed at home, they become nurturing and they'll deliver children. That was the assumption. But contrary to what he thought, when women stayed at home, they delivered less when compared to women who are out there working, earning, and they delivered. So the entire trend assessment, everything was wrong. So sometimes governments make mistakes, statisticians mislead. For instance, today if we talk about statistics, a woman is supposed to deliver on an average 1.7 kids. Has anyone delivered 1.7 kids? So it can be very dangerous. Looking at statistics is so dangerous. And most countries are looking at trends, statistics, numbers, and aping blindly without understanding what could be a city-centric or country-centric policy for pushing women into working. Now, I'd like to give one very drastic and real example where all the governments in the world got it wrong. Everybody got it wrong. Everybody made a mistake. And that was in the case of Millennium Development Goals. See, if you look at Millennium Development Goals, all the nations said, we will look at these goals and achieve them. And 200 country heads, presidents, prime ministers, everybody came and signed up those Millennium Development Goals. Now, what are they? The first one is about poverty alleviation. Second goal is about elementary education. Third one is about maternal health, improve maternal health. The fourth one is about infant mortality. And the fifth one is about HIV, communicable diseases. Let's control them. The sixth one was about gender empowerment, gender equality. The seventh one was about environmental degradation. And the eighth one was about global partnerships. So all the country presidents, prime ministers came and hurriedly signed everything. But year after year, I don't know if any one of you has followed, year after year, every country would be ashamed to talk about the Millennium Development Goals, what they have achieved. You know why? Because the countries have put equal money, equal effort into all these goals without realizing that if they had prioritized properly, they would have achieved all of them. Now, you know, post-mortem, what they should have ideally done? If they had taken just one goal, gender empowerment, they would have achieved everything. You know why? Just see. An empowered, educated woman. Take a look at the first goal. What is that? poverty alleviation. You think an educated, empowered woman will allow poverty to enter her home? She will not. You know why? Today studies say that whatever the woman earns, she puts it back in her family. Because if a woman earns money, it goes back into her family, there's better nutrition, there's better education, there's better health care. So obviously poverty would have been addressed. The second one is about elementary education. As I said, women, when they earn, they put it back into education of the children. So that goal also would have been achieved. The third goal is about maternal health. An educated, empowered woman, you think, will neglect her health when she is pregnant, be it prepartum or postpartum? It won't happen. The fourth one is about infant mortality. How many infants die before they touch age 5? I don't know how many of you are doctors here, but I can tell you that a large percentage of them die. And you know why they die? They die for simple reasons like not having oral rehydration. They have diarrheal death. Simple oral rehydration. An educated, empowered woman would certainly know that. She can protect her children. The fifth goal is about what? This is about HIV communicable diseases. An educated, empowered woman, don't you think she will know how to protect herself from communicable and HIV kind of diseases? She will, of course, protect herself. The seventh goal is about environmental protection. An educated woman. Today it's proved beyond reason that educated women know the difference between fossil fuels, what is global warming, what choices to make to protect the earth. So obviously that goal would have been achieved. And the last goal, my friends, is about global partnerships. You know, it's amazing to see that an educated, empowered woman, the amount of networking that she does is amazing. I had seen years ago that in Africa, they gave just a bit of education, just a bit of exposure to education, and they just burst into the network of other entrepreneurs across the globe. So an educated woman would have even ensured that global partnerships would have been achieved. And this is exactly where all the governments, with no exception in the world, have made a mistake in realizing the Millennium Development Goals. So most of the countries today are trying to blindly ape, and without realizing what is the core of the country, what is the gene pool they have, what can they do, what can they do differently that they can grow? And that thought has not been given. I'll give you another example. Just to prove it, that you have to have a country-centric approach, I'll give you one example. Years ago, there was an experiment in the United States. So what the government thought was, a typical average white American was more healthy than his counterparts, like Spanish people, Mexican, and Mexicans, Spanish people, and any of these countries where they moved in as migrants. So what they did was, they said, let's give them equal opportunity. And blacks, by the way, sorry, blacks, Mexicans. And they gave equal opportunity. They said, we'll give them equal education, we'll give them equal access to health care. Let's protect them and see where they will reach. They continued the experiment, and they realized after a few years, same education, same access to health care, everything being same, Mexicans and black Americans still had cardiovascular disease, diabetes. They're not even able to address that. So they dug a little deeper and checked what could be the problem. So then they understood they were culturally different, and the way they were utilizing their homes, the way they were made was different. So they moved them to different tenements, exactly like American homes, and then continued the experiment. After 2 years, they discovered, notwithstanding this change, again, those people had higher incidence of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So when they dug a little deeper, you know what they discovered? Why were they falling sick all the time? And in spite of everything being same, why did they have the problem? That's because of what we call as ethnicity. Ethnicity, that is your own DNA, your ethnic composition. So this is a simple case to prove that if you blindly ape anything from other parts of the world, you may just not achieve your goals. And that's the reason why India perhaps is not even moving forward. To prove that, there's another simple example. Years ago, I was invited to speak at ICRSET. So there's this senior man from UK who gave a story. He talked about a case of health problem in UK. There's this lady who had breast cancer. She had 3 children. She had breast cancer and she died of cancer. The first daughter got breast cancer, she died. The second daughter also was diagnosed with cancer. And the third daughter panicked. She said, "Oh my God, I think it's my turn next." And then she ran to the doctor and she told him, "Doctor, I have young girls to take care of. What if I also have cancer?" The doctor said, "Look, there's no guarantee that you will have cancer, so why don't we go for a DNA test?" So she said, no, I don't have the time. I need to protect my children. I need to protect myself. So she said, "Do something but protect me." So typically in such a case, they do what we call as a radical mastectomy. So both the breasts surgically had to be removed. So the doctor said how complicated this is, but she said, "I don't mind. Take me for the surgery." So the doctor put her on the table, did the surgery, and before the surgery, he took a bit of her blood and sent it for testing. So after the surgery, this lady was sutured up, she was mutilated, she was disfigured, she was a beautiful woman, but she lost her so-called physical beauty. And the doctor calls her to tell her about the finding of the report. So when she picks the call, the doctor calls and says, "The report says that you don't have the genes that give you cancer." And you know what was her response? Can you guess her response? She did not worry about it. She did not cry, "Oh my God, why did I go for that?" You know what was her response? She said, "Thank God my daughters will never have cancer." So this is the construct of a woman. This is the DNA of a woman. And when you try to push women into those hazardous environments where men work, then it just will not work. And this is what the world is waking up to. And the countries are looking at newer ways of getting them into working. So today you might just stop me and ask me, so what is the solution for these kind of problems? So look at India. I would say that India has to very strongly look at India-centric solutions. What does India have? What are we good at? What is our gene pool? And given today what is happening in the advancement of technologies, like for instance, Kiran Mai talked about everything, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, big data, data analytics. You have everything, bleeding edge, cutting edge technologies. These can be learned from home. And the world is so connected today, you can just stay at home and control not only devices, you can control people. There's so much of opportunity in social media. The world is supremely connected today. So people don't have to really get into conventional jobs. If a woman has to be empowered and employed, she can look at multiple options, and India has to explore this. And thanks to this kind of thinking and thought process that's happening in the government today, I realized yesterday, I think Mr. Piyush Goyal was talking about, there's a discussion between him and I think the CII people. And they said, India job creation is not happening. Blue collar, white collar jobs might remain the same, but there is another group of jobs, entrepreneurs, and that is called no collar jobs. If women can work from anywhere, they can just stay in their own respective homes and can contribute, work differently, explore their own inner resources and completely work. And that should be India's policy and India's solution. Rather than aping other countries, making women infertile, getting them into different kinds of health problems. You don't know the kind of health problems women have because of that. So at a personal level, I'd like to say that years ago, I was teaching a bunch of IAS officers. So there's this lady sitting there, And we were talking about styles of leadership. Those days, styles of leadership was the in thing. So I said, what would you look at? How would you call yourself? What is your style? So she looked confused. All of them, somebody said, I'm like a tiger. Another lady got up and said, I'm like a wolf. But this lady is confused, and she is not a new recruit, a fairly senior IAS officer. So she said, ma'am, I have this confusion. And she said, can I speak? So I told her, speak. She said, when I'm in my office, I'm like a tiger. When I go home, I'm like a dog. When I'm with my friends, I'm like a bunny. I'm playing with them. And she gave me animals, some 10 animals in different situations. And then she said, am I wrong? His point is, this is what is called old way of talking. I don't teach or preach leadership, but I know it's called situational leadership. So given a certain situation, you change your form, and therefore you rule, and therefore you conquer. So she has demonstrated what it is like. So for some of us who are into religion, and people like Ananda sitting there, the dancers, you look at Ardhanarishwara Stotra, you remember, it's amazing. The God is both a man and a woman. And if you look at Ardhanarishwara, at will, you can get what is the masculine side of you, the feminine side of you. If you identify with Ardhanarishwara, at will you need to get. So women should have the freedom to at will call the man in her or call the feminine in her. And that is something that I think India should definitely explore in terms of policy. Give her the freedom, give her everything to look at different facets of herself and maximize her potential. So I'd like to conclude by just, again, going back to the religion and my favorite stotra. Today is Friday. So normally Fridays are dedicated to the goddess. And I don't know how many of you read Devi Khadgamala. Anyone? So I see a few hands. So before you start that, it goes like this. It says, Asya Shri Suddha Sektimala Mahamantrasya Upastendriyadishthai Varunaditya Rushihi Daivi Gayatri Chandaha Satvika Kakara Bhattaraka Pithastita Kameswaranka Nilaya Mahakameswari Sri Lalita Para Bhattarika Devata Aim Bijam Kleem Shaktihi Sauha Kilakam Mama Khadga Siddhyarde Sarvabhishta Siddhyarde Jeped Viniyogaha Mulamantrena Sharanganyasam Kuryat. This is how you recite in the beginning. When you say Khadga, Mama Khadga Siddhyarde, every time when people say Khadga Siddhyarde, they look at Khadga and they think it is a sword. So what do you do with a sword, right? You want to kill people who are your enemies. You want to destroy the negative in the world. So that is what you think Khadga is. But my friends, let me tell you today, Khadga is not that. Khadga is the power of discretion. It's the power of discretion. What is right for you and what is not right for you. What is good for you and what is not good for you. So if the country today looks at what is right for the nation and the women of this nation, then it will have the right policies in place. So at a macro level. And the second one is about Sarvabhishta Siddhyarde Japed Viniyogaha. Sarvabhishta Siddhya is what? All your desires to be fulfilled. All of us keep praying and asking for our desires to be fulfilled. But you know when the goddess will sanction the desires for you? When your desire is tied, linked, joined with the good of the world. When your desire is joined, linked, connected to the good of the world, she will grant it immediately. So this is to let you know your desires have very large implications in the world, to the society per se, to our country. So wish for the best for you and best for the country. And at a policy level, I think governments should know how not to make mistakes and make India-centric policy for pushing women into leadership positions and power corridors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karuna Gopalji. That was a brilliant speech, and specifically the shloka you recited right now. Even I was not aware, though I am a devotee of Goddess Mata. Anyway, I would request Dr. Rekha Pandey ji. She is the Professor, Department of History and Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad, to come over to the dais and felicitate Karuna Gopalji on behalf of Pragna Bharati. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. And we'll now break for the lunch, and we'll be back on 2:30. We'll meet here only after half an hour. You can also visit the trade fair going on, the Saksham Trade Fair. We have a cold oil extractor stall is there. The crossover leadership partners, they are the counselors. You can visit them. The tribal welfare, handicraft people are there. They have all the handicrafts made by tribals. So quite a few interesting stalls are there. You can go and visit. Thank you so much.